soulpower.com, the new rhythm and bluesy contemporary hip hop solo podcasting. So we're going to get started today, and we're going to talk about the issue of power in the United States and the issue of mental illness. Basically, what we have in the United States is that America and Europe, which is the country that most of our European Americans are from, is racist and has a mental disorder. Now, in the mid 60s, some black psychiatrists, including Dr. Alvin Toussaint, who was popular on the Cosby Show and helped Cosby develop the show, he and some other black psychiatrists tried to bring this issue to the American Psychiatric Association, the APA, and they rejected the issue, saying that basically so many people are racist in the United States that it's a cultural issue, and thereby the culture would have to change, and that's a cultural issue, largely politics and culture, and not a medical issue. So racism continued. In 2005, I believe they tried to change it again, and again, nothing happened. So this is an issue of power, that white America has power, a power elite in particular. Holds the power, and therefore they will not do anything to disrupt their system. They will never hand power over to blacks, or they will never educate properly, empower blacks who need an Afrocentric education, because we are Africans and we were brought here, and basically our mental life, in terms of it being an intellectual life and how we practice our religion, speak, our habits and behaviors, morals, values were dismantled. Therefore, to get back to our Africanness, we have to first acknowledge that we are in a system of power that is meant to dominate us. It uses stereotypes to basically um, teach our people that we are ugly, and teach the world that we are ugly through Hollywood movies. I call it Hollywood because it's weird. And therefore, once you start using stereotypes to help you dominate, big black lips are ugly, big noses are ugly, and white skin is beautiful, and on we could go. So you're dealing with a dominant power, dominant culture, and a subordinate culture, black people, other minorities, but black in particular, who were enslaved. You're dealing with the stereotypes, which is basically planting inferiority in the minds of blacks and superiority in the minds of whites. You're also dealing with exploitation, which is some of the issues I just talked about. Big black lips are ugly. And all these issues are tied together. So we have a power situation, and we have a dominant culture who has a mental disorder. Now, what are the characteristics of a mental disorder? The characteristics of a mental disorder basically are phobias or fear. And we know that a black man getting in the elevator instills fear in a white woman, in the sense that she'll clutch her purse. If you ever been to the mall or Walmart or somewhere, you know that when you pull up next to a white person who's getting out of their car, they often double click their locks, right? See this all the time. So the characteristics are fear or phobia, a distorted perception. You know, of course, you can argue with whites all day about their perception of a comment or a situation that occurred, and they say it's not racist. You're playing a race card. So we have perception is distorted. We have fearophobia. We also have another characteristic of a mental disorder or mental illness being delusions of grandeur, right? In other words, whites operate and blacks operate as victims under an atmosphere of delusion. Okay, we are deluded. We believe in things that are unbelievable. For example, the cops just keep killing black people, and you turn on CNN, and Wolf Blitzer keeps talking about hey, or you're saying that those kids throwing rocks at the cops, that's okay. So what he's trying to do is get black guests and black leaders to discount the violence. In other words, the cop used violence to kill a black person or a black kid, and yet the mass mainstream corporate media tries to get black leaders to negate that violence, to say that, hey, you shouldn't be violent, but cops are violent, but that's not the context of the questioning or the argument. So that's how the media keeps black people under control. That despite cops killing you, you cannot become violent. And we've been waiting for 400 years for the political process to change something, and it never happens. So we have a delusions of grandeur, perception distortion, and we have fear and phobia. We could go on, but those are basically a couple of the hallmarks of a mental disorder operating in the context of race in the United States or racism. Another issue we have to look at when you talk about power is fear. And basically, slave masters instilled fear in blacks that is still quite evident today. And that fear is about the fact that if you do anything to try to disobey my orders on this plantation, you will be whipped and you will be killed eventually. If you try to escape, we will send the dogs after you. We will hang you, whip you, or put you in some sort of prison or containment. So that instills fear in the people, and they teach this fear to their people or their children. And slavery is not that long ago. I remember growing up. I grew up in the 70s, but I was a child and born in the 60s, and I remember my grandfather taking me to my his mother's home, my great grandmother, and I thought about it. Man, I was born the year Malcolm X, 1963, was around, and I believe the year he was killed not long after that. And I'm thinking, okay, my great grandmother's mother had to be born during slavery. She lived to a ripe old age, so it's not, and I'm still here. So you're looking into the eyes of someone who looked into the eyes of his great grandmother, and her mother was born during the slavery era. And after slavery, Jim Crow, which was a form of slavery. And so when you start thinking about the fact that slavery is not long ago, it's just a drop in the bucket in the history of time, and that the people in the system are still here that run the system, the power elite. The older white Americans teach the younger, they carry out the orders, believing in the American dream carrot being dangled before them, and therefore they have white privilege. And that's a good deal for whites. The wealth for whites is about $100,000 when you look at everything, investments, income. And blacks is about $5,000 or less. So, and blacks have no savings. And so this is something that has to be considered not just only in terms of looking at the black poor, but the black middle class also is often one or two paychecks away from poverty. And what we have is a system. In other words, a black professional with a degree, and I have 2 degrees, and I have been fired a couple of times because of racial discrimination. And I fought and I won some settlements, and that's because I knew what I was getting into. To be at least in terms of in the process of becoming a free black man, you have to first get over your fear. And I don't go looking for trouble. It's just the fact that when you're successful in black in a professional environment, they will try to change your job. They may make threats to you. They want to treat you differently, and so you have to make a decision as to whether or not you're scared. Now, of course, you're political and you're smart and you try to control your emotions, but they keep coming at you. Once they have their eye on you, or once you're a threat, because of your intellect and intelligence. And in my case, working at a college, talking to kids about race and stuff, that's enough to put you under a microscope. But you cannot have black kids in any educational system, college or grade school, and not talk about race. But our system does that. So my responsibility as a free black man, African, or however you want to call yourself, is to also teach whites and blacks about race, and that's what I did. And kids eat the information up. Most of them. Some of them are like spies. They run back and tell the administrators, oh, you're talking about race and that sort of thing. And you have black spies who wouldn't work for the system. So, we got into protesting, and in fact, our protest was once stopped. So we, sat down and had a big dialogue with the school and everything. But these are the sort of things that happen, and I'll get into that story in a book later. I'm going to talk about that experience. But I have many experiences that I had to basically learn what discrimination was, and by the time I get into a confrontation with an employer or school or what have you, I've already been documenting for months because there are signs, when they start picking or doing things or feeling threatened, okay, I got to do this, I have to do that. The college I was at, I was also coaching the basketball team and running all kinds of groups, very successful, and initially wasn't acknowledged. They were acknowledging everyone but me, and I had more programs and more students involved than anything, and I spoke up. So you have to be bold also. But the point is, you have to be educated. You have to understand discrimination. You have to get over your fear of being fired or whatever it is they may try to do to you. And that's really the worst thing. 9 times out of 10, they're not going to try to kill you, right? They may kill you if you let it stress you out. But I saw some studies when I was working on my grad degree in psychology that said basically that if you feel you can do something against to protect yourself or fight back when it comes to your oppressor exercising racism against you, the stress level goes down greatly. So, in other words, if you don't feel like you can fight back, if you're afraid and you're fearful, that's going to manifest itself in terms of your actions, and you won't fight your oppressor. If you feel like you can do something, that you know the discrimination laws and you're documenting things, and you feel like, I'm going to do something about this, then that alleviates a tremendous amount of stress. And that's the key to fighting racism. So I'm going to get into these subjects later and break them down. And I just want to say, check out my blog, universalsoulpower.com. That's universalsoulpower.com, the new rhythm and blues of contemporary hip hop soul to podcasting. And I will be back soon with another subject and chew on some of those facts that I talked about. Peace.